Now, tell us a little bit about the Constitution Amendment Tobago Bill and what it means for the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, Justin, it is a significant document in that it is one which seeks to explain and expand the role of the governance structure in Tobago, in that what it does is that it looks at, and when I tell you, it's a phenomenal document. I am intimately familiar with the document. I've seen it, and I have looked at some of the other bills, and let me tell you, this green paper is something that really traces the history of the development of Tobago. It looks at the whole question of how the union between Trinidad and Tobago came about, and it looks at how they have tried over the years, starting with the Simongal Commission in 1979 and others, which then tried to bring about this effect in terms of how do you manage the governance of Tobago for Tobago and by Tobago.
Okay, walk me through this just a little bit. I may have some of my... I've been trying to get the facts, but in terms of the PNM brought out something, and then some were saying that the UNC came, scrapped that, and brought out something else with respect to Tobago and you know, giving itself more autonomy and stuff like that. Is that true? Was there
what has happened is that there have been quite a few consultations. You've had the John Prince Committee, all right, and then you had people like Dr. Rita Pemberton.
Right.
They also had input from Senior Counsel Russell Martineau, and a lot of good work has been done. So what this does is that we are not at all discarding the work that has been done before. No one is, disregarding it. But what we're doing, we're consolidating, collating, and collecting all the data so that what we come up with is one final comprehensive document which truly speaks to the needs of the people of Tobago within the context of Trinidad and Tobago.
And what has the consultations brought about? What are the biggest thing that the consultation brought about?
We had our first one yesterday evening at Rovenel's in Tobago, and I must say I was heartened to see the response. First of all, you're talking about a Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. when,
taking on the itis.
Mm-hmm. But they all attended. The attendance was very good. The comments were extremely lucid and well thought out. You had some people who did all their research. They looked at comparative situations, like, for instance, the situation with the provinces in Canada, how you look at, the governance structure. They looked at, like, a federal system, like how you have in some states. They also looked at, like, relationships, like, for instance, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Barbuda, that kind of thing. So there's a whole body of information out there that we've been able to collect, and what we're doing, we're distilling the results, presenting it to the legislators so that they can now make the appropriate law to govern this arrangement.
Give us an indication based on what you know thus far. I know you have another consultation tonight at 7, but based on what you've...
This one is in Chaguanas, and the importance of it is because we recognize the fact that any change in the governance structure is something that must affect both Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, the Attorney General has indicated quite clearly at the start, and this is in accordance with what the Prime Minister has requested, that the consultations be throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad. And
so could
a Tobago issue, the impact of it is on all of Trinidad. Consultation with everyone possible in Trinidad and Tobago.
This particular change has effects, or could have an effect, on the local government system in Trinidad and Tobago. In your mind, how do you see it working? Could we see a situation where Cyperia or Chaguanas or any of the other borough corporations like Tobago could eventually start collecting more taxes and dealing with issues in their particular jurisdictions?
Well, the point is, if you look at, for instance, in Switzerland, where they have the system of the cantons basically end up managing their own affairs in terms of their collections of taxes and their expenditure on goods and services for that particular canton. So the point is, I guess maybe Trinidad and Tobago may evolve to a status where people want that, because there's also the question of local government reform. But this must be distinguished from the whole concept of local government reform. This is not local government reform, because remember, the Tobago situation is governed by the Tobago House of Assembly Act at present. So therefore, it's a completely different scenario, even though it has the effect almost of local government. It's a specific piece of legislation we're dealing with here, the Tobago House of Assembly Act.
Do you think that Trinidad and Tobago is too small a setup to allow for these kinds of autonomy to be taking place? Now, Tobago is a separate entity altogether, but in terms of what some people are talking about, well, maybe ARI might want to do that, maybe Shogunas might want to do that. Do you think that the setup is too small for us to accommodate that kind of setup?
Well, as I said, I mean, all of that falls under the question of local government reform, and as to whether we're too small or not, I'm not sure that we are, because there is talk among those who are speaking about local government reform of trying to decentralize the government so that everything isn't so, bureaucratic and cumbersome and Port-of-Spain centered. So there may be need in time, I think, to diversify and, spread out the way the resources are deployed, how the taxes are collected. But, I mean, obviously we have not reached that stage yet.
The situation with Tobago in particular, though, we had the budget being read in Tobago today, but once again they have to come cap in hand, for want of a better word, to the central government for their daily running. Could we see this amendment giving them greater financial strength?
Well, actually it will, because in the Green Paper it's proposed that the annual allocation in the national budget for Tobago shall be not less than 6.9% of the total national budget. So that's one of the points that has been put there. So, of course, there's the question as to how do we arrive at that figure, how do we justify that figure, but the point is it's an increase over what presently obtains. So, therefore, you can see definitely that you'd have an actual increase. Now, in terms of the fact of having to come to central government for the money, that is something that they are looking at, in the sense that if they allow Tobago to be able to collect taxes, then they may have a greater level of autonomy. But of course, the responsibility and accountability. So it's a very delicate balancing act as to how much responsibility you give, how much freedom you give, and how much accountability and checks and balances you put in place to manage the scenario.
We're chatting with Martin George. He's an attorney at law and the commissioner on the Constitution Review Commission.
You're giving us an idea about the financial side of it. Now, what are the major changes from a legislative and executive power side of it?
In terms of the legislative, what they have they have designated that the Tobago House of Assembly, the executive of it, shall comprise of your chief secretary, and you must have someone in charge of legal affairs. Now, the importance of that is that it mirrors in some way the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, because you know that for you to have a properly constituted cabinet and functioning executive in Trinidad and Tobago, you must have the Prime Minister and you must have an Attorney General. Correct. So in other words, it's basically they're trying to mirror that so that Tobago now gets that kind of status also. And so that's one of the main changes.
Okay. So that's what, legislative? That's
keeping with the legislative theme, what you have now is that the Tobago House of Assembly will have the ability to pass laws which must then be approved and assented to by the president. So the thing is, you actually have lawmaking power. Now, that lawmaking power, of course, is circumscribed in that you have certain aspects which they are proposing would be exclusively under the jurisdiction of the THA. Then you have some which would have concurrent jurisdiction. So in other words, things like, for instance, air and sea transport, those things obviously impact both Trinidad and Tobago. So you can't leave it to Tobago alone to make the laws in respect of that. So what you do, you have those under the concurrent list. So therefore, under that concurrent list, you must have now the input, the direct input of cabinet in terms of this.
Mr. George, let's just stretch our thought for a few moments. We have Ian Wallace coming up with the weather in just a moment. We have a situation right now where the political dynamic in Tobago is different from that in Trinidad, and that causes a certain amount of political tension. When we have this new scenario where Tobago can create law for Tobago, when there are differing political ideals, could we have issues?
Well, it is quite possible that you would, but the point is what the THA would be limited to would be creating laws in relation to things which are specific to Tobago. But as I said, part of the reason why that consultation must be done throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, and that's one of the fundamental differences between some of the previous consultations that took place. I don't think anybody took the time or trouble to go throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad. to get the views of Trinidadians, because Trinidadians must have a say in this process too. While it is something that is fundamental to Tobago, the point is because it's going to impinge, as I used the example of ANC links, that is something that impinges on both Trinidadians and Tobagoans. So therefore, Trinidadians must be aware of the process. They must have the opportunity to have some input. And of course, you have so many thousands of Tobagonians living in Trinidad. Let us meet them here in Trinidad, get their views also. You have more Tobagonians living in Trinidad than you have living in Tobago. So that's why we are going throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad also to meet with these Tobagonians who are here also, get their views, let them have an input.
Attorney at Law Martin George and Constitution Review Commissioner. He's on the line with us. We're going to be taking a very short break, Mr. George, and we have to get our weather update from our meteorologist here. And we'd like to make contact with you again so that the callers can have a chance to throw some questions at you.
Okay, all right.
All right. Thanks very much. That's Mr. Martin George. We're going to take a very short break and come back with Ian Wallace.
Have you noticed the strange visitor crawling around in your yard or surroundings? Perhaps you've not been looking. The giant African snail is in Trinidad, and it has the potential to eat all our food crops and spread disease. The shell is reddish-brown in color with creamish stripes. Most mature snails will reach about 20 centimeters in length, with an average length of 6 centimeters. They come out mainly at night, but may be seen in early evening and after rainfall. If you see the giant African snail, take action immediately. Call the hotline at
16 minutes before 6 o'clock. Major news coming up at the top of the hour, and we continue discussion on the Tobago Constitution Amendment. There is a discussion on tonight at the Chaguanas Borough Corporation at the new town hall in Cumberbatch Street in Chaguanas. That's beginning at 7 p.m. and will run until 10 o'clock. There was already one yesterday out at Rovinell's Resort in Tobago, and today they want to get the Tobagonians in Trinidad and of course the Trinidadians' perspective on this matter.
If you can't make it and you want to read the green paper for yourself, you can log on to www.ag.gov.tt. That's www.ag.gov.tt. Or you can call 623-7010 extension 2620 to get yourself a hard copy. Martin George is on the line with us, Justin.
Yes, Raymond.
We also want to open up the telephone line to you.
622-4911, 622-4911. We want to hear from you at this time. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Counterpoint.
Yes, good afternoon, Justin and Raymond.
Good afternoon.
And to the attorney there.
Yeah.
Now, I want to find out something. The same way the president has the right to appoint independent senators in our parliament, in the parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, should the president have that same power to put independent people in the Tobago House of Assembly, people from Trinidad and Tobago? Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Mr. George, would you be able to
answer that? Actually, that was one of the questions that was raised yesterday. It's a very important and relevant question because more than one speaker yesterday raised the question of independent persons to also form part of the assembly. So it's one of the things that we will be noting in our report.
What has been some of the major contentions coming up from the consultation in terms of I should say against it, the problems that they
one of the things would be the delimitation of the boundaries, the sea boundaries, the maritime boundaries of what is Tobago. And of course that has always been a contentious issue, but we have to look at it in the context of the agreements which were made in the 1982 Montego Bay Convention, where you now define the boundaries by a straight line and not by marking along the baseline of Tobago. So in those circumstances, it doesn't appear that you can get anything more than a maximum of about 10 to 12 miles within the twin island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Whereas as a unit together, we would still be entitled to our 200 nautical miles, but the point is, intra Trinidad and Tobago, between Trinidad and Tobago, that would not be possible.
622-4911, 622-4911 is the number to call.
Very interesting then, Mr. George. What does that mean for the natural gas and oil reserves that may lie between Trinidad and Tobago? Who do they belong to?
Well, that's the whole point. And it's something that I can tell you lots of Tobagonians are concerned about and they are interested in. In other words, they're saying that, look, if it is that these things lie within what you can specifically define as Tobago, then they're saying that they would want to have some kind of say in terms of the dissemination of the benefits and profits to be derived therefrom. But of course, it's not a simple equation at that, because you have the question of the technologies, the ability to manage those resources and extract and exploit them. And all of that right now is Trinidad-based. So, of course, you would have to look at the issue of, okay, who is putting in what and what are the returns to be derived.
This here represents really the beginning of a journey for Tobago getting its own, getting a little bit more autonomy. Where do you see the end of this journey? Do you see it as being, complete secession or just complete autonomy? Where do you see this journey ending?
Secession forms no part of our brief or mandate, and if you look at the draft green paper, you would notice that it doesn't go anywhere near that. And I don't think that's something that anybody really wants. In fact, from the comments on the floor yesterday, I think most of the people from Tobago who spoke, they made it quite clear that secession is not on the cards. That's not what they were thinking of. All they are looking at is greater power, autonomy, and authority in terms of managing their affairs.
So you think that this is going to be...
Unfortunately, I'm going into another function,
okay.
So I have to thank you and I have to leave.
Well, I will thank you as well. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
And good evening, Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, that was Attorney at Law Martin George. So Raymond, are you confident this is going to be the end of it? Once they've dealt with this, then that's it.
We'll have to work out the bugs in the system, because this will be new, Justin, for the relationship between the central government and the THA. No matter how you try, it's going to have some teething issues. There are going to be some teething issues, and we'll have to see how it works, because we have a situation where Tobago can create law. That's incredible. It's novel. It's going to change the landscape. It's going to change the relationship.
They can only change what affects them solely, and not so much Trinidadians, or not so much Trinidad, I should say.
It depends on who's in the leadership, because I can pretty much guarantee. That's why I asked Mr. George a question about personalities and politics, because dependent on the personality that is in power, you may see a completely different interpretation of the same law. Remember, we have this whole issue, for example, during the 1818, and there was a whole interpretation of will and shall, right? Yep. And to this day, people argue that will means must and shall means must, and which it is. And up to now, we haven't gotten a clear indication. And that has never really been resolved. That's in our constitution. So there may be issues coming out of this that we all need to address.